Hello and welcome to Vibrations. I'm Raven Geary. If you, a friend, or a family member have ever been placed in a life-threatening situation, then you know the importance of dialing 911. When you dial those 3 magic numbers, you're giving yourself immediate access to the 3 most important life-saving services available to our community. Later in our program today, we're going to talk to representatives of the local police department, fire, and ambulance service. But first, a look at Tallahassee's emergency medical service and the care they provide to people in need.
I need somebody to help me right now, please. It's my daughter. I don't know what's wrong with her. I live at 5...
Call it a typical night for Tallahassee Memorial's emergency medical service. This is one of only several calls dispatchers will likely take tonight to provide a life-saving link for somebody in trouble. Time is critical. The first few minutes are important because they could mean the difference between life and death. Emergency medical technicians must be able to quickly evaluate a problem and transport a victim to the hospital.
People tend to not have very good abilities to survive gunshot wounds or severe abdominal wounds from crushing injuries or something, unless they get to surgery where they can go in, they can tie off the veins and arteries. And we don't do surgery in the field. So within the golden hour, you want to have the patient off the street, into the hospital, and go into surgery if it's required within that golden hour. And that's when you get your best results.
Some situations prove more difficult than others. The scene of a murder, rape, or assault can not only make the job more difficult, but more dangerous. EMT personnel are trained to respond to a variety of situations, but some calls are best handled with the assistance of local law enforcement.
If it is a hazardous situation, our policy states we are to wait until the area has been secured, even by fire department if it's chemical or fire or something like that. If it's violence was involved or possible danger of any type to the public, then we will wait until law enforcement goes in. And that is the policy. We are not allowed to enter hazardous areas if it is a known hazard.
There have been criticisms about response time, concerns that local police and EMTs approach cases differently when they are located in predominantly black areas, like Frenchtown and the South Side. Mott says that if an area is secure, he never hesitates to respond to a call for help.
I go on in. As I say, I may be the person that doesn't worry about his safety as much as other people do, and I never have. In fact, I'm kind of like the moth to the flame situation. I want to go ahead and into the situation. A lot of times I've probably even gone in when maybe I should have stood back and let law enforcement get there, but there are times when law enforcement is stretched.
On a slow day, EMT personnel don't sit still. They can often be seen out on the street providing courtesy assistance. Mott says it's not only a job, but a true profession, that EMTs really care about the community that they serve.
We had a lady who has seizures. We went down, checked her out. She didn't want to go to the hospital. She didn't have her medicine. She didn't have a ride, which is one of the big areas in the poor neighborhoods. They don't have rides to get to medical facilities or the drugstore. I don't know whether it's they're either afraid to go through their neighborhoods, or they don't want to walk, or they're afraid to bother a friend or neighbor, or whatever it is. That's some of the problem a lot of times, just access to medical facilities. So today we just said, well, we're going back to our station. We'll drop you off by the drugstore. And when we got to the drugstore, we saw a police officer, and we said, would you take her back because she has a seizure problem. We don't want her being overstressed. She wants to stay home. So at times we go out of my way to help. Yeah.
If you are a family member or witness to an emergency situation, the best thing you can do is not panic. The more information you can provide to a paramedic, the quicker he can respond to the situation. Anything known about a victim's medical history, such as a heart condition or allergy to a particular medication, saves time, and it may save someone's life.
Most people will be very helpful, and most people if a paramedic or somebody, as I say, is focusing in on or tunnel vision on that patient, they may not act as though they're listening to the family member, or they may what the family member says may not have anything to do with it, but that's some learned skill. You've got to learn to deal with the people, and a lot of times treating the family is half the battle. If you treat the family, you give them the time to express their view of what's going on, and give some helpful information, or do something like hold an IV pole, or pick up a piece of equipment and bring it to us, or carry it out to the truck. You get them involved in the whole care of the patient, and they feel like they're helping their loved one or their friend, and that's something you have to learn over time, that if you do things like that and you treat the whole scene plus the patient without jeopardizing the care they need, then it'll all go a lot smoother.
Joining us now in our studio for a look at the emergency response departments that are located in the Leon County area are Ernest Williams, Deputy Chief for the Tallahassee Fire Department, Bobby Bailey, Director of Emergency Medical Services at Tallahassee Memorial, and Major Walter McNeil with the Tallahassee Police Department. And welcome all three of you gentlemen today to Vibrations. First of all, I wanted to say thank you so much, Mr. Bailey, for the ride.
You're welcome.
We had a very interesting time out with the EMS crew earlier this week. Give us an idea about the importance of response time. That's the major thing that people want to know about, is when they're on the phone, and we've heard this so many times, when people call you, they want you there then.
That's correct. Well, the response time is important in most of your serious cases, particularly a cardiac arrest situation where the person's not breathing and the heart's not beating. According to the American Heart Association, you have 4 to 6 minutes to start doing CPR on that person, or they're not going to be a viable candidate to be resuscitated or to bring them back from this death-like state. So that is something that generally across the country people try to shoot for, is get some type of help or trained help to your victim in need within 4 to 6 minutes. There is no real national standard at all. It differs by locale, differs by financial ability of that particular locale to deal with any given situation that they have. But in this area, we meet those standards within the city of Tallahassee, generally with no problem. And the response time doesn't necessarily involve just the ambulance getting there or just the fire service getting there or police. That response time starts from the time the call comes in. And we have dispatchers that are trained to provide medical assistance to the caller, much like you see on 911, the TV show, while we're on the way. So we're decreasing that response time by trying to teach somebody how to do CPR from the moment the person goes down.
What would you say is special about your crew, about the team of paramedics that work with you?
They're truly dedicated to what they do. They're not in it for the money. There's no doubt about that. It's not glamorous. I think they just enjoy helping people, and that's their drive.
Chief Adams, something that many people out there may not be aware of is the fact that the EMS and the fire department work very closely together, and not just in fighting fires. Tell us about first response.
Yes, we do have some of the same objectives. The fire department has stations located strategically around the city and Leon County, so that we can get to most locations probably quicker than the EMS, and our people are trained in first aid, first responder. We do have people that are trained to the level of EMTs and paramedics.
Now there is a experiment of sorts in progress right now, I'm told, in Killarn, where you will have is it the fire department and the police, or what is that?
The EMS is co-located.
EMS and who?
Right. Well, we are co-located with the fire department.
They're co-located in our station, so that will give them a closer.
Could that be the wave of the future for other stations around in the Tallahassee area?
We do have an agreement with EMS that they can co-locate in any of our stations.
When is that likely to happen?
I guess it's kind of up to us, actually.
It's kind of up to them.
Right.
That's kind of in the experimental stages right now, but in many cities, the ambulance run right out of the firehouses.
Okay. Now, people call the two departments, the fire and the ambulance service, quite a bit here in Tallahassee, but I would assume that the most calls come to your department, which is the police department first. So can you give me an idea, Major McNeil, what is it like working with all three of these departments together in the area? How well do you feel that you're able to serve the community?
We're extremely fortunate here in Tallahassee and Leon County to have the caliber of service that's provided both by fire and EMS services in the Big Bend area for the most part. We enjoy a very close working relationship. We find ourselves, as you indicated, we are usually the first service to arrive on the scene when you've got a traumatic circumstance. And our officers find the EMTs and the fire service to be extremely helpful in assisting. Without question, the EMTs and fire personnel are extremely professional in this area.
I want to ask a question that many people would like an answer to. Do any of your departments treat the south side of town differently than they would any other departments? I'll start with you first.
No, in fact, as calls for service go, we spend a greater percentage of our time on the south side of town dealing with problems. As is customary or has become customary in our society, those persons who find themselves on the outside of the mainstream economically are more involved with crime, being victims of crime for the most part. And as such, the police department finds itself responding to a great extent in the south side. And we've got more officers stationed in the what we call the downtown area, which encompasses Frenchtown, than we have in any other section of the city. The same thing's true of the south side.
But
So,
you're not surprised that there are criticisms about response time in those areas?
no, I'm not.
You're not.
There's
Okay.
for the most part, Raven, we're talking about the black citizenry of Tallahassee, and black people in general have had a historical distrust for those persons who are in uniform. And so I'm not surprised that there's a belief that there's not the same level of care and concern when responding to the black community.
I'll ask you the same thing, Mr. Bailey.
We're similar to fire in that we have stations spread throughout the city of Tallahassee. And in 1972, when the service started, we started with 2 ambulances stationed at the hospital. And as times changed and as we trended our calls or our call load and found out where the most calls were coming from, we would place additional stations, or what we call stations, in those locations to diminish the response times to those areas. And we have 2 stations that affect the south side, as you're calling it, so we can get to those areas relatively quickly. One of them is located on Magnolia Drive, probably a quarter of a mile or half a mile from Orange Avenue, so it's able to access that area very quickly. And the other one is located near the Civic Center, so it can access the FAMU area and the downtown area very fast. And that's purely because we need to be able to get to those people in a reasonable amount of time, and that was our reaction to it. And that seems to be a standard across the country for EMS and fire.
Do you ever hear from many of your paramedics that there is friction between them and the African American community when they enter into scenes to help treat victims?
From time to time, I hear that about all scenes. It doesn't matter where it is. You'll have various influences that cause people that are on scene to react in different ways or to be irritated upon your arrival. And sometimes it's their frustration with what they're having to deal with, and they unload it on you because they don't know how to deal with it. And I guess that's just part of our job, is to deal with that like any other medical emergency.
I would also assume that it helps to have someone who is an African American when you are going into those areas too. And earlier this week, when we took our ride with Tallahassee Memorial's Emergency Medical Service, we got the chance to meet one of the department's most respected paramedics. And in this next report, producer Rod Carter is going to take you on a ride and talk with him. His name is Franklin Springer.
Emergency medical services are extremely important, and sometimes it helps to see someone helping you that you can identify with. For African Americans in Tallahassee, that person could very well be Frank Springer. Frank has been with the Tallahassee Memorial Regional Medical Center's emergency medical services for about 6 years.
Being a paramedic is an exciting occupation. It's gratifying in as much as you get to help your people in the community, and it gives you self-confidence to work with your family. If something should happen in your family, you know about what's going on. So it's a gratifying occupation.
Frank is in the business of helping others. In fact, he's so dedicated he goes out of his way and volunteers his time at the Gadsden Memorial Emergency Medical Services when he's not on duty in Tallahassee. He says, though, despite where he's working, people who call always complain about response times because when they call for an emergency, the moment they hang up the phone, they want the paramedics to be right there.
Usually, a person that need an ambulance, time go by real fast for them, and it seems like it's taking an hour because they're there, and they want you to get there real quick. So a lot of times they said, "Well, what took you so long? I've called you 30 minutes ago," but you know what time you got to call, and usually when we get to call, we're en route, so we know exactly how long it took. So it's natural, and we understand that, and we understand that they're going to feel that way, so we just ignore it. This is usually normal. Patient is a bilateral amputee.
Frank Springer is a model family man. He has a wife and 2 kids, one of which is graduating from high school this year. He says he wants his son to consider the medical services as a possible career path, and he also encourages all young African Americans to look into the medical profession.
This field here is a field that I would recommend for black African Americans, and simply because you get to learn about your body, you get to learn how to help your family, your friends, even if you're not occupied in this field. It's a good one to endeavor into. It also is a field that you don't have to be doing something all the time when you're waiting on a call. If you get into this field and you want to go out and do something else, it affords you the time to study in between. We don't be doing things all the time on this field. It's self-gratifying. It's a good field to get into.
Being an EMT is self-gratifying?
I would say so. You do have many calls that once you've completed that call, you really feel like you made a major impact in that person's life. And it makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside. Can't deny it.
Chief, do you ever get complaints that you're not there fast enough?
Yes, those complaints do come, but it's easily verified whether, how much time it took us to get to the call.
What's your usual response time? From the time you get that call and someone says, my kitchen's on fire, or something's happening, I need you right away, what's the response time?
The Tallahassee Fire Department has had a 4-minute response time in the city for many, many years.
Is that considered very good?
That's very good.
That's very good.
And that is our objective, to get there as quickly as possible to try to contain the fire to the area of origin. And certainly if someone is trapped in the area, we will get there within a reasonable length of time to try and make a rescue.
Now, we do hear from time to time that there are certain cases, for one, a shooting that was on South Adams, and another when there was a killing on Putnam, that there are times when people see the ambulance pull up, but you don't see people getting out and going into the scene. How do you explain that?
We have a policy that we follow, that we've had in effect since 1987, that limits the entry of our staff under certain circumstances to certain types of calls. And it's mostly associated with a a hazardous situation, or what our dispatcher deems to be hazardous.
What does hazardous mean? Someone may be there with a gun,
Sure.
or
Right.
Okay.
Assaults, shootings,
Okay.
stabbings. You know, where there's a reasonable possibility that the person that did it is still on scene, or the scene is not safe, and law enforcement is not there yet. And so we have a policy of going close to the call, within blocks, and waiting for law enforcement to get there and let us know by radio that it's safe for us to come in.
Does the fire department do the same thing? Is it the same policy? You
Well,
won't go in if
we
it's a
have
possible
similar-
arson or something?
We have similar protocol. If certainly if there's a shooting or some hazardous material, even other chemicals in the area, we do wait and find out what it is that we're up against. And if it is a hostile situation such as assaults or shooting, we do wait for law enforcement before we go in, because we have been called for a fire, and you can't fight a fire under hostile conditions. So we do wait for law enforcement.
Okay, so everybody's waiting on the police
Wait on the
department.
police, right.
Okay, so
Raven, that is the responsibility of law enforcement, to respond and to basically secure the scene.
well, is that added pressure on you? They are there, they're waiting on you. Not only are you needing to respond, but you need to respond almost twice as fast, because people want to see you come right away.
Yeah, that's true, and usually our response time in emergency circumstances is much, much greater than either one of the other services can provide, because we're usually right there in the neighborhood. We've got a car stationed somewhere nearby if it's an emergency situation. The rule of thumb is that, and we've used this for a number of years, we're going to respond within 2 to 5 minutes to any type of emergency. The issue of the other services responding, they have to wait until police are there. And
Is this with every city, or is this just with Tallahassee?
this is a universal process.
Standard policy.
Absolutely. That law enforcement has to get there. Our role is to secure the scene until the emergency medical people or the fire people can get to the scene. The one rule of thumb that we constantly try to use is, and we say this to police officers, if they can't get there and be safe, then they can't assist the person who's injured. If the harm to, the potential harm to EMTs is so great that they themselves stand an opportunity to be hurt, you worsen the situation instead of being there to alleviate a problem. So it only makes sound sense for them to wait until law enforcement there to secure the scene, and then they come in and take care of the needs of the person who's injured.
But in return, you're going to get a lot of flack.
Well,
You realize that people are going to be saying,
What
this
the
is
community-
taking too long.
what the community must understand is, particularly in hostile situations where it's not a circumstance where a person's got a gun, many times we get to scenes and we've secured the person who's to be arrested, but you've got all of the other people who don't understand what's going on, who are coming to the scene, makes it real difficult for us to secure the scene so that EMTs can get there. And that's something that the community must understand, that the best thing they can do is let law enforcement do its job so that in turn we can allow EMTs and fire people to come to the scene and do their job.
How do you feel about the criticism from the African American community that response times are slow? Do you hear it from, say, the Killearn area? Do people ever complain in Killearn that you're not fast enough?
Yes.
So everybody complains.
Yes. And we have a very involved complaint system at the hospital. As you can imagine, for anything that's medical, you're going to have that type of a process in place. And I really don't get that many complaints on response times, as many as you would think you would, you know, if it was that hot of an issue. And I've gotten very few from the community that you're referring to.
Okay. Chief, what can we do to better the relationship between our emergency services and the South Side and the African American community as a whole?
Well, probably what we're doing now, public education, trying to get out in the community, let people know exactly what it is that you're doing and how you perform your duties. Tallahassee Fire Department has ongoing public education. We try to teach people not to have a fire, first of all, and how to get in the system if you did have a fire. Back to how one may feel if you had a fire in your kitchen, minutes seems like hours. If you standing there watching a fire progress in your house, it does seem like a long time from the time that you make the 911 call to the time that we get on the scene. But it's normally in the city limits, it's 4 minutes. So fire can cause a lot of damages within 4 minutes. So teaching the public what it is that we do, teaching them how to prevent these situations, and just general public education can help.
We're just about out of time, but I want to give the community a couple of pointers. I learned a couple of things on my ride. I have yet to go on a ride with the police department, but in the fire department, but I learned a couple of things, and one of those is that if you live on a street that may not be easily identifiable or doesn't have a sign, send somebody, am I on the right track? Send somebody out and tell them to wave them down so that they don't get lost. Also try to give as much information as you can on the phone. Now, we have a 911 system now that's very advanced, am I correct? It will immediately tell your address and where you're located when you first call in, is that true?
I'm not sure.
Isn't it enhanced now?
Right, it's called an enhanced 911.
Enhanced line.
When the caller makes the phone call to the 911 center, depending on whether they live in the city or the county, it's automatically routed to the police department or the sheriff's office. And they do a very brief screening to determine whether it's a law enforcement call or fire or EMS, and then it's transferred to that agency.
Do you get many crank calls?
The enhanced system has kind of
knocked that out.
Eliminated, right?
Okay, well that's good. That's a good thing about that.
Because we know where the calls are originating from.
Okay, and then another thing too I learned was please stay out of the way when emergency vehicles are coming through. We noticed that a lot. People just stopping and standing in the middle of the street, especially when we went to one call and people were just hanging around and the emergency vehicle and the lights are going and you're saying, please get out of the way. Is there anything else that I've forgotten I need to mention that you want the public to know about?
Well, you were asking about the 911. It does give the address and the phone number where that call was coming from, and that is an asset to the dispatchers in confirming and diminishing that response time by being able to tell where the call is coming from.
Okay. Gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for joining us today on our program, and your just being here, I'm sure, makes a very big difference to people out there who are concerned about response time. I'm Raven Geary. Thank you for joining us this week on Vibrations. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.